And, those words changed the course of history came from an email I received from one of our customers, a general that was in the field, who sent me an email that simply said, I can't tell you why and I can't provide any specifics, but your team and your technology changed the course of history today.
Hey, everyone, and thanks for listening. Today, I'm speaking with Ryan Hartman, President and CEO at Worldview, the company on a mission to build new stratospheric solutions and tap their full potential for humankind. Ryan, thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, this is great. Well, love, obviously stratospheric balloons in the last year have been of some interest, so this will be a fun conversation. But, before we get right to that, I saw that you've spent some time in the Navy and the Air Force, and really want to thank you for your service. But love to hear, how did that journey go? What led you, to serve to start off with before moving on?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it was an honor to serve, and appreciate that recognition, and right back at you. So, growing up, I had two grandfathers that came from very different backgrounds. One of my grandfathers was a cattle rancher, spent a lot of time learning from him, and my other grandfather was a Army Air Corps veteran, having flown in World War II. And my grandfather Newton, who was the Army Air Corps veteran, he would pick me up after school every now and then, and he would take me to have coffee starting like in 4th or 5th grade or something, which my mom didn't know that until much later in life, that he was taking me to have coffee. But nevertheless, he would take me to have coffee, and he'd share these stories about his time in the Army Air Corps flying B-29s. And it was just fascinating to me. And I loved the stories of camaraderie. I loved the stories of military aviation. And so I decided I wanted to pursue that. So I joined the Air Force when I was 16. Had to wait until my 17th birthday to ship off to boot camp. And so I went to boot camp on my 17th birthday. I spent a number of years in the Air Force and decided I really wanted to get an education, and applied for a program called Bootstrap that enabled enlisted personnel to pursue an education on the Air Force's nickel. So I did that. And then while I was going to college, I got riffed out of the Air Force, which was a bummer. But the Navy recruiter called me and said, "Hey, we got a role for you if you want it." And so I joined the Navy and became a P3 naval aviator, and did that for a long time and loved it. I'd say I have a unique perspective of having served in both the Air Force and the Navy, and they both have incredible things about them, and very positive things, and they both have their challenges, but both of them were incredibly rewarding. And so I'd say there's no way I'd be where I am today. There's no way I'd be the disciplined leader I am without having the opportunity to serve. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Well, I won't make you admit publicly, but I know you prefer the Air Force, so appreciate that. Go back to your grandpa a little bit. So did you see Masters of the Air? What'd you think of that?
Oh, yeah. It only provided me with a greater appreciation for some of the stories, that I heard from him. He was on B-29, so he was in the Pacific, not in Europe. But nevertheless, I'd hear these stories, and, no doubt, my mind was like, yeah, sure, whatever, granddad, But then, seeing stories like Masters of the Air and, watching the series Pacific, it sure heightens your appreciation for what they went through.
Yeah, that is what a great generation of men and women.
No doubt.
I mean, holy cow.
No doubt.
I loved it. They loved our country.
Exactly.
What type of, because you mentioned leadership, but I would agree with you, serving in the military, it's just a giant leadership laboratory for the amount of time you serve. It's fantastic. What were some of the key, characteristics or traits that you think you've pulled out that have helped you become successful to climb to, corporate, CEO?
Yeah, there's a number. I think serving on air crews. So in the Air Force, I was on KC-10s. You want to talk about contrast from B-29, KC-10. They didn't call us the Gucci boys for nothing. Having served on KC-10s in the Air Force and then P-3s in the Navy, one thing was constant, and that was just crew coordination and communication, right? Everybody had a role, and those roles were only fully satisfied if you were properly communicating. In some pretty intense moments, I learned how communication was key. I'd say one of the most intense moments I've ever experienced in my Air Force career was when we were flying Marines and soldiers in and out of Mogadishu, Somalia in 1993. And we were there when Black Hawk went down and that whole scenario. And we needed to leave Mogadishu, and you're in this massive KC-10 taking off out of there, and there's concerns about surface to air weapons and whatnot, and that was a really intense egress out of Mogadishu. And I just remember just the precision of the communication, the focus that we had, and obviously was a non-event, but I'd say a significant amount of that was around the communication. And similar in P3s, anti-submarine warfare does not happen without having a very communicative and strategic tactical coordinator, a PPC, a patrol plane captain, and a flight engineer, and everybody else that's operating the system, so that we could do this very complex mission. But it would take, all 11 of us to do our job to make sure that we could execute that mission correctly. And I'd say in the corporate world, it's identical. You have all of these different roles, you have all of these different crises that you're trying to manage through, and what makes it work is proper communication. And it's something that I certainly learned from the military, and it's something that I continue to learn that you can't do enough of. And so that's one of the things I'm grateful of. And the other is just the importance of leadership, having a vision, being able to communicate that vision in a way that is strategic and tactic all at the same time, or tactical. It's one of those things that you learn as more of an art than a skill. The best military commanders who can communicate a vision and a strategy into tactics and do it in a way that is understood and can be executed. It really is an art. It's something that I'm grateful that I have witnessed. And I'd say in a lot of ways, I'm grateful to have picked up on elements of that art from some of the best leaders I've ever seen in my life. So those are some of the high points, I'd say, that I've translated into my career in leading companies.
Yeah, that's great. And I've heard you talk before, but servant leadership was another good one that I've heard you mention, that how important of having that vision and be able to translate that down to tactics, your strategy, but then going through the journey with your people, and I appreciate, military folks that have then gone on to leadership, the commercial, because there is a unique posture, or perspective, from the military. Then you get into the commercial, how to lead through things that are hard and conflict while keeping the team, even though there's challenges and there's things that are messed up, but keeping them motivated to serve. And so with that, I know you mentioned also that you're a purpose mission company. Can you talk a little bit why you say that, and what drove you to making that part of your mantra within your companies?
Yeah. So at Worldview, we exist to inspire, create, and explore new perspectives for a radically improved future. And so that's our purpose. That's our why we exist. And the reason that we start with that, and the reason that we lead from purpose, from a why, is it connects people to the end result of what it is that we're trying to achieve. I really started to understand the importance of purpose from my ranching grandfather. So my grandpa Hartman, he was an incredibly passionate rancher. He was doing, what we call today regenerative ranching before it was a thing, I'd say. But he would talk about the importance of leaving the land better than we found it, leaving the ranch hands better than we found them, making sure that they had a career in front of them, that this was just a stepping stone. And so he would take time to teach people and about more than ranching, but about being a father, a leader, a husband, et cetera, and just set people up for success. And so I had a front row seat to seeing what it meant to lead through purpose. And I observed how the results of that were just very fulfilling, and how people appreciated what my grandfather was offering for them, and how they would go on to become successful ranchers themselves, and some of them even, owning their own ranches. And so, even though I had a front row seat, it wasn't until later in life that I truly understood the importance of that. And that was in the very early days of being a part of a company called In Situ, which was an unmanned aircraft company that I became CEO of. I started to hear some of the stories from the field, and it felt like that what I was hearing from the field was the reason we existed. And I'll give you a couple examples. One of the stories was our very first deployment to Fallujah, Iraq. We were deployed with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. We had 10 civilians, In Situ employees, deployed to just outside of Fallujah, Iraq with the 1 MEF. And their job was to launch these Scan Eagles and then operate these Scan Eagles for the 1 MEF. On the very first mission, they were supporting some troops maneuvering in an urban environment, and they were behind a building, and they were getting ready to round a corner. And the Scan Eagle operator had noticed gunfire coming from a rooftop not that far away from him, and recognized it as a sniper, and immediately communicated that, had those Marines hold before they rounded that corner, so that they wouldn't become targets of that sniper. Soon after that, after that day's mission was complete, someone recognized that just having that Scan Eagle there saved lives. Who knows how many lives, but it saved lives. And then there was another story that really hit home for me, that I recognized the importance of a purpose. And this was, an interesting one, where a woman came to our headquarters in Bingen, Washington, came through the front door and asked the security guard if she could give the CEO a hug. And he said, I'm not sure. Let me go talk to some folks. And so the security guard, Kevin was his name, he came back and he said, "Hey, sir, there's a woman who give you a hug. I'm not sure why, but she seems pretty passionate. And I thought maybe you'd want to chat with her." And I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to chat with her." So I came out into the lobby and introduced myself, and she immediately gave me a hug. And I asked her, to what honor am I receiving this hug? She said she had just gotten off the phone with her son, who was a Marine deployed to Afghanistan. He had finished his first mission in Afghanistan. It was a resupply mission where they were on a convoy, with a bunch of Humvees and trucks taking, ammo and food and whatnot to one of the outposts. And they found themselves in the middle of an ambush. Would describe it as being very chaotic and scary, but they had these systems called Rover, which is a remote, video terminal, where they could, see relevant situational awareness data. But what they were seeing on it was a live feed from a Scan Eagle that was directly overhead. And they could see where the gunfire was coming from. They could see the best place to take cover. They knew where to call for fires to eliminate the threat. And they, escaped that situation completely unharmed and just went about their mission. And this young Marine asked one of his fellow Marines, "Where was that video coming from?" They said, "Oh, that's from a Scan Eagle. We never do a mission like this without them." And he thought, well, that's interesting. I don't know what a Scan Eagle is. So they did the mission, got back to the base, and he looked up what a Scan Eagle was, and he saw it was this little UAV made by this company In Situ from his hometown of Bingen, Washington.
Oh, wow.
So he called his parents, out of pride to say, "Hey, did you guys know that company In Situ that we always saw, logos of? Well, this is what they do." And I wouldn't advise a young Marine to call his mother and say, "I just got out of an ambush and it was so cool," but he did. And so she immediately put down the phone and ran over and wanted to give us a hug because she felt like, we had a positive impact and saved his life. And so when we share those stories inside of the company, we recognize that the purpose behind what we did was more important than the what or the how. And so we spent a lot of time refining why we existed. And we ultimately defined it to be that in situ exists to innovate in all that we do so that we have a positive impact on people's lives and change the course of history. And it sounds, huge, and it is. But when we started to talk about the stories, we started to see behaviors change inside of the company. And especially with the folks that were on the leading edge, on the front lines of delivering our service to Marines and soldiers and special operators and international coalition partners around the world, when they understood that the job was to have a positive impact on people's lives and change the course of history, they started seeking opportunities to have a positive impact. They started seeking opportunities to change the course of history. And, those words, change the course of history, came from an email I received from one of our customers, a general that was in the field, who sent me an email that simply said, I can't tell you why, and I can't provide any specifics, but your team and your technology changed the course of history today. So we talked about that incessantly inside of the company, and I just fully appreciated through those stories that if you want to lead a company to do great things, you should ensure you understand why you exist first, and everything else starts to fall into place. And so I've carried that through everything I've ever done since understanding that. And so here at Worldview, we've taken on that same approach where we recognize why we exist, and that is that we exist to inspire, create, and explore new perspectives for a radically improved future.
Well, what great stories. It gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, right? If you can find those stories that give you goosebumps, if you can find those stories that, make it tangible for you, it's easy to get behind company as a whole, and it's easy to expect great performance from a team when they can truly understand why you exist.
Yeah, serving something bigger than the daily paycheck.
Exactly.
How quickly you can get off work. No, and that is, I think, one of the cool things about working in defense industrial base is, that why is easier. And I think there are other industries and companies to work with that make that much more challenging.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, that's awesome. So typical day as the CEO at Worldview, what was it like? And, what do you find fascinating?
Well, I say there's three primary elements of my job. There are engagements with the team and ensuring that, we stay connected, that I understand what they're doing. I understand the team's challenges. They understand, my challenges and the things that I worry about. And so when I come into the office first, that's one of the things that, I always like is to engage with the team. Even if it's just saying good morning, how's your day going? Or, how are you doing? It just creates a connection, and it creates an engagement that I think is really important. I'd say a third of my day is usually focused on engaging with the team and staying connected to the team. The other thing, or the other element of my job, is staying connected to customers. I thoroughly enjoy being connected with customers, largely related to the conversation we just had around our purpose and why we exist. I like to understand customer problems. I like to understand, what are things that we can be doing to make our customers' missions more effective? Are there things that we need to be innovating around that can better contribute to saving lives, or better contribute to greater situational awareness? So that's a really important part of my job. I'd say I'd like to dedicate a third of my day or more to that. For a company that's as small as ours right now, that's kind of hard. I might become annoying to our customers, but nevertheless, it's an important part of my job, which then means that, that other spare time related to customer engagement is spent, as the chief salesman for the company. So I spend a lot of time on the road. I spend a lot of time trying to engage with future customers or potential customers to help them understand the benefits of the stratosphere and help them understand the benefits of our technology. And then lastly, the other, bucket, or the other, the third primary role I have is investor relations, where I'm engaging with our investors, ensuring that they understand the importance of the work we're doing, and that, they feel like we're treating the very precious gift of treasure that they have provided us, that we're using it effectively and smartly and with discipline and trying to execute our overall strategic plan. So those are the three areas where I spend the majority of my time. It's the people and engaging the people. It's the customers, both present and future, and then investors, making sure that relationship remains strong.
Yeah, well, that's great. A lot of things to do. Well, cool. So you make stratospheric balloons.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that technology and then the advantages over, other aerial platforms that are in adjacent or similar, the similar space from a capability standpoint.
The stratosphere has traditionally been a domain, if you will. It was either a transit area, for things leaving the troposphere and going into space, or it was just an area that was very temporary in accessing it, and it was mostly for transit or for some high altitude reconnaissance, U-2s and SR-71s and whatnot. But that was really the lower stratosphere. Over time, as NASA started to access the stratosphere more and more, and as the understanding of the stratosphere became more known, the benefits of the stratosphere started to become clear. And there's really two different areas that I'd say the stratosphere are very helpful if we're talking about a remote sensing or an Earth observation type of mission set. So that would put us in the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance kind of domain, operating in the stratosphere. So the first benefit is you're operating at an altitude within a domain where you're 10 times closer to the Earth than the closest satellite. So that means you can produce very high quality, high precision or high fidelity imagery, but you're high enough that you can get a very broad perspective. So if you're operating at about 75,000 feet, you're going to be able to see for hundreds of kilometers, and you're going to be able to produce 5 to 7 centimeter imagery. Whereas from space, the highest quality imagery you can produce is 25 centimeters, and that's regulated to 25 centimeters. But the highest quality that exists today is about 30 centimeters. So the difference between 5 centimeters and 30 centimeter imagery is, all of a sudden, with 5 centimeter imagery, you're going to be able to see people, and you can see if they're holding something. You can see people interacting or engaging. You can see, vehicles, and you can identify the types of vehicles. You can see is it a truck? Is it a van? Is it a sedan? You can, start to provide, maneuvering tactics, to folks, because you can produce high enough resolution and granular data that starts to become a reality. And that's one of the benefits. But the other benefit is you can take advantage of a unique set of events that happen in the stratosphere, or one of the unique attributes of the stratosphere, and that is that in the stratosphere at different altitudes there are 4 directional winds, right? So whereas in the troposphere, where you and I live, the winds generally go in one direction. They might swirl a little bit, but you're not going to find winds going in all 4 directions at different altitudes. Whereas in the stratosphere, that does exist. And so if you can properly harness that phenomena that happens in the stratosphere, then you can freely navigate, or you can do what we call station keeping. Mm-hmm. And so what our technology does is we can precisely control our altitude. And by being able to precisely control our altitude, we can stay in a 40-kilometer radius area, as an example, for 10 continuous days. You can't do that with space. You can't do that with airborne assets. You can only do that from the stratosphere. And so we take advantage of that. The other thing that enables us to do is fly for very long distances and with precision. We can travel from point A to point B, and those points can be, many thousands of miles apart, and we can freely navigate between those and arrive on a specific day, or ensure the precision with which we arrive, and those kinds of things. And that's some of the uniqueness of the stratosphere and some of the advantages of it.
What are the technical challenges of operating in that space?
Yeah, so there are a number. It's both very cold and very hot. One of the cool facts about the stratosphere is, it's the only layer in Earth's atmosphere that it gets warmer the higher you go. So once you bust into the stratosphere and you keep climbing, it gets warmer as you go up. That said, it doesn't get that warm, but the solar heating that does exist, because there's not much protection from the Earth's atmosphere, it gets quite hot. But when the sun goes away, it's very cold, minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we get equivalents of plus 40 or higher during the daytime, plus 40 Fahrenheit during the daytime. So it's both cold and it's very hot. So you have to cool and you have to heat. And the cooling in the stratosphere is very difficult because there's not a lot of air. So you have to have different strategies for managing that. The other challenge is, is you're dealing with an increase in radiation. It's not significant, but it's an increase in radiation that makes it a challenge. And then the other challenge is the materials with which we use for operating in the stratosphere. So we use linear low density polyethylene for manufacturing our balloons, and it's quite thin material. A lot of people compare it to freezer bags, if you will. But when it's in the stratosphere, there's two challenges. One is it firms up, almost to a glass-like material. It becomes brittle. And so you have to design around that. And then the other challenge is, holding the lift gas. So the material is, it's a very strong material, but you're trying to contain the smallest molecule in the atomic table, helium and hydrogen. And they're sneaky little molecules. They're always trying to find a way out of the material, and they do find a way. So we have this permeability problem where the lift gas is trying to find its way out. And so, that's one of the challenges that we're always trying to overcome, is to, contain the lift gas for as long as possible, so that we can increase the duration of our flights. And currently we can fly for about 45 days, and our goal is to get to 90 days in the next iteration. And then the iteration after that, get to greater than 120 days. And so those are some of the challenges in operating in the stratosphere.
I mean, it is interesting material. I've always, what if you get like a little breach does it kind of mold itself over because of the environment's in, or does it just leak?
It just leaks. So the balloon itself, the lift balloon, as we call it, is a zero pressure balloon. And so that means that, the atmospheric pressure on the inside of the balloon is identical to the outside of the balloon. So the importance of that is that when there's a hole in the balloon, the lift gas isn't being forced out. It's just, sort of escaping. This usually plays out over many hours, if not many days, before it has a real impact. Unless it's all the way on top. If there's a big hole on the top of the balloon, the lift gas is, trying to go up, and so it would escape faster. But it's not like something where all of a sudden, the balloon just deflates or pops. It's just a very slow and gradual event that we manage. It doesn't happen very often. Very rarely do we experience a leak or any kind of cut in the balloon, mostly because of handling and how it's manufactured.
Interesting. So how many balloons do you have airborne right now, or like out on the market?
So this year we're doing 19 flights. So the way we run our business is on a manifest where we schedule the number of flights in advance and then execute those flights. So we operate those for very specific customers. We sell the flights to customers. We might change where we launch them or where we fly them to, but we stick to 19 flights for the year. Next year we'll increase that to about 40 flights and start scaling the business from there. And so those 19 flights, it's a mix of two different classes of systems we have. So the one class is what we call our altitude control systems. And so that's our stratolights, as we call them, that can change altitude so as to be able to freely navigate into the station keeping. And then we have another class, the system that we call the Tycho class. That's a a system that's not altitude controlled and flies for a day or a couple days or so. Those are flights that we do for customers who just need a day's worth of imagery, or maybe it's a communication capability that they need for just a day or so, or some other data collect that they need. So we'll do 19 flights this year. We'll start doing flights in Australia this year. So we're expanding outside of the U.S. And setting up a Indo-Pacific headquarters in Australia, starting to address the market for the South China Sea, and some of the scary things that might be happening out there, providing surveillance over the Indian Ocean, where there's a significant gap in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets, and then supporting some operations in the South Pacific.
So you basically are selling the flight, or that's the product you're selling. The payloads and everything are completely managed by your customers, and how they get them up there, you just have to connect to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually two different ways. So we have our own baseline set of sensors. So we carry an electro-optical sensor, or two different forms of electro-optical sensor. There's a high zoom electro-optical sensor. Then there's a wide field of view electro-optical sensor. Then we carry a shortwave IR for doing day and night, but being able to see through salt fog, see through smoke, those kinds of things. And then we carry a mid-wave IR, and then we have the capability of carrying a long-wave IR in that same sensor ball. And so when we fly with that sensor, essentially what we're selling is the video, the intelligence product that comes off of it. And we'll sell that typically based on time. So a customer will, they'll buy 30 days worth of imagery or 45 days worth of imagery, sometimes maybe just a week worth of imagery. But the intent is, that we're selling them the data that we're collecting. The other business model that we have is to fly customer sensors. So we fly a decent number of, I'll say sensitive sensors that do things that we don't know, but we know who the customer is, and we essentially provide flight services at that point.
Interesting. So if I go back a little bit to it's just fascinating, the stratospheric kind of climate and winds, you said 4 directional winds.
Yeah. So
if there were, let's say, an adversary's balloon flying across the United States, it's not just following the jet stream. It is intentionally going probably in that direction.
Yeah. So our technology is unique in how much of a range we have in the stratosphere. So operating, I'll say in our normal operating envelope, we can operate between 45 and 75,000 feet, so 30,000 foot altitude range. Other systems, like what we saw flying over the U.S., that does have some altitude control, but it's more like 10 to 15,000 feet of range. And in 10 to 15,000 feet, you're going to have a hard time being able to, turn around, if you will. You'll be able to, slightly change your course, but you won't be able to necessarily, turn around or prevent yourself from flying over a border. That said, we monitor, some of those flights quite closely, just trying to understand what they're doing. I'd say it's my personal assessment that, where they launched from, they could have very easily understood and predicted where it was going to fly, and flying over areas that were of interest to them. And so I do not believe that it's just a mistake or a balloon gone rogue.
Right.
What it validated for all of us is that, the stratosphere is now a contested domain.
That's what I was going to ask you about. So as you see that now it is contested, how is that changing anything from your, I'd say short to medium term plans on, defending against that? Or is this more of not yet, still a volume play? And
yeah, it's more of a volume play. And I'd say it's more just understanding that, as an industrial base, a defense industrial base, we have to do our part to make sure the U.S. is properly represented in the stratosphere, right? It's not a domain we want to concede to anybody else. It's a domain that has value in the overall C4ISR picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's our job to make sure we're scaling the business, we're maturing our technology in a way that ensures quality intelligence product, and that it's in some ways just a demonstration of U.S. innovation, right? That we will not be out innovated by other nation states.
Is this a crowded marketplace, or do you have first mover advantage / only mover advantage?
No, there's a few of us, but there's only a handful of companies globally that are doing this. That will obviously change. And there's more and more companies popping up now that are wanting to do work in the stratosphere, and specifically with balloons. That when Stanford students write business plans in Stanford about doing stratospheric ballooning, that there's going to be more and more businesses popping up as a result. So, that happened a few years ago where I saw a business plan that a couple of students wrote, and now they have a business doing stratospheric ballooning, which good for them. I think it's just indicative of the fact that people recognizing the stratosphere is very interesting.
Yeah, no, it is definitely. So where do you see from technology, what will be like the next big incremental step in stratospheric ballooning?
Well, I think the next step that we're going to see is just more of an ever presence. So as I mentioned, we're doing 19 flights this year. I mean, if you compare that to Predators or Reapers or Global Hawks, or any other kind of unmanned, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance system, or even skiing eagles, like what we used to fly at in situ. At our height, we were flying at any given second, any day of the week, any week or month of the year, there was at least 27 skiing eagles in the air somewhere around the world, right? And we're doing 19 flights a year of our technology, right? So it's tiny, the amount of flying that we're doing and the number of hours of intelligence that we're creating. And so the next big step that we're going to see is just an ever presence. You're going to see or understand that in certain parts around the world, there's just always going to be something in the stratosphere, just like there is in space, right? Because it's the uniqueness of it. So that's going to be the next big step. And what's going to enable that step is the fleet management of those systems. The way that our system works, and being able to do autonomous flight from point A to point B, or being able to do station keeping, it works very well when we're controlling a system. But when you're controlling dozens of systems or hundreds of systems, it becomes a very complex math problem of managing all those systems, coordinating all those systems so that you can make sure that you're always providing the intelligence product or the remote sensing product that the customers want, on the day they want it, where they want it, et cetera. And so those are the two big things that will be happening in the stratosphere, an ever presence enabled by fleet management, being able to put those systems where they're needed, when they're needed.
So it's less of there's not like a manufacturing, or it's more just how to operationalize this super efficiently that meet your customers' needs.
Exactly.
Well, great. Well, a lot of, guests on here are working with the Defense Industrial Base, hence the title. But how do you like working with the government? How's your experience been?
They're a necessary customer, I'll say. But more importantly, I'd say that they're having customers in the Defense Department. I appreciate it that it brings our purpose to life. That the missions that we're executing, it gives us an opportunity to support something bigger than ourselves, something bigger than our company. So that's important. The acquisition community is challenging, understandably so, and I'd say in some cases, for good reason. That said, I'm incredibly appreciative of the efforts that have taken place, and the future efforts to make the Department of Defense acquisition system work better. We're beneficiaries of things like DIUX. We're beneficiaries of other rapid prototyping and rapid acquisition programs. I'd say more and more of those more programs like this are going to make the defense customer easier to work with, especially for startups. It's my experience that startups in the defense space is probably the hardest community to work within, because you might get some initial traction with a prototype or a proof of concept, but crossing the chasm is nearly impossible without having a partnership with an already established defense company. At In Situ, we had to partner with Boeing, and that we wouldn't have been successful otherwise. It was a great partnership, and I was glad that we were able to do that, but we would have never succeeded without a partnership with Boeing. And the same is true with so many other companies. There's rare examples where that is the case. Anduril is one of those exceptions. I'd say they're an exception just because of the amount of capital they've been able to put into that business. But that doesn't happen for all businesses. You can't. Not all businesses have a Lucky Palmer that know how to raise money, and the end result is they have a great idea that gets acquired prematurely and usually destroyed. The big four are terrible at acquiring companies. If you don't get acquired early, then you end up partnering, and then you can become successful. So.
Yeah. So you guys have, congratulations, by the way, just closed or recently closed your Series D with Sierra Nevada.
Yep.
So that's awesome. How is that going to help your growth trajectory?
Well, in a number of different ways. I mean, the capital obviously is important to us as we scale the business, and we're honored to be able to take on that capital, especially in a period of time that's very difficult to raise capital. So, that just speaks to the let's say the growing interest in technology like ours, and the understanding of the stratosphere being a contested domain. But beyond the capital and being able to scale, what it brought to the table was that partnership that I was just speaking of. So we're now a strategic partner of the Sierra Nevada Corporation. And what that's going to enable us to do is really focus on integrating our technology into broader C4ISR architectures, right? So ensuring that there is a connection to the task, collect, process, exploit, and disseminate chain where it's appropriate. It's also going to give us access to unique sensor suites to enable new use cases within the defense customer base. And then lastly, it gives us access to a large engineering base, where as we work through some of the challenges that we have in maturing our system, that we can access a large number of engineers and learn from them, and tap into the innovation that exists there, and to be able to tap into supply chain strategies and be able to grow our supply chain through partnership with Sierra Nevada.
Yeah, that's super exciting. At one point, you guys were looking at doing commercial flight. Is that still on the roadmap for?
It is.
For you?
Yep, it is. There's commercial remote sensing, where we can use our technology to do things like methane detection, security operations, agriculture, wildfire, bushfire monitoring, those kind of things. So that's part of it. And then, we also have on our roadmap being able to use our technology for space tourism, to be able to provide people with very unique aspect or perspective of our planet. And what beyond just the space tourism component of it, I believe that there is, a need for a market for, research and even intelligence products where there's a human in the loop. And so that manned element of operationalizing the stratosphere, I believe it extends far beyond just space tourism. And that's one of the things that we're passionate about.
That's super, super exciting. Well, that'd be fun. Very different experience than a quick 3-minute rocket ride, that touches space.
Yes, exactly.
A couple days or hours upon hours would be pretty neat.
Exactly.
Well, Ryan, I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got to cover. We have to cover today. But if someone wants to learn more about what you're doing, how's the best way to follow you guys? And
on all of the social media platforms under Worldview Space, or you can follow us at www.worldview.space. And you can access all of our social media channels through our website as well. we try and put out a lot of content just so people can understand what we do. So any of the social media channels or our website.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks again, Ryan. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you. Great conversation.